Need a pen, son?
Yeah, thanks.
There you go. You can keep it. I'm very sorry about your mother and father, James.
Many people. Heart pound.
Good evening, Rowan. It's the 13th of December 2015 and it's about 9 o'clock. And here is my usual Sunday evening video that I'm making specially to reassure you that I haven't been seducing any priests over the weekend. Just for a change. I thought I'd have the weekend off this weekend because I was feeling a bit tired and the weather's a bit miserable, you know, it's just not the weather for me to be going out seducing priests. So I thought I'd stay in and have a rest. And I had a lovely Sunday dinner, obviously, with my Yorkshire puddings that I can now make on my telescopic oven shelf. I thought I might make you a video actually showing you how to make good Yorkshire puddings because when you're in jail you might get a job in the kitchen and I doubt you've got any useful life skills because you're too busy scheming, aren't you, and stabbing people in the back and driving them to suicide and all that kind of thing. So I thought you probably haven't had the time to learn how to make good Yorkshire puddings. And you're genetically unsuitable for making Yorkshire puddings as well, probably, being from other parts of the world. So I thought it would be very helpful for you to have a useful life skill, because you have a lot more money in jail if you work in the kitchen. So it would be really useful if you knew how to make Yorkshire puddings. So I thought I might make you an instruction video. Because I'm all heart, you see, and I'm only thinking of your welfare. Just like you were thinking of my welfare when you were going around slandering me behind my back for decades. So, anyway, I'm going to talk a bit more about that tonight, because I did read out 2 letters from you earlier this week and late last week about how you had me sacked from everything at St Michael's Church and then thrown out for complaining about your perverted friend David Pete sexually harassing me. He did actually announce from the pulpit once that he was a personal friend of yours, so if he isn't a personal friend of yours then you need to take that up with him, don't you, because he said that he was. Anyway, I said that the intention of your behaviour towards me in relation to St Michael's Church was that you wanted to make me capitulate, first by sacking me, and that didn't work, so then you had me thrown out of the church. And I would like to reiterate that the reasons in this letter that you had me thrown out of the church were that I briefly left the church building for a period of time when there wasn't even a service going on, and that during the service I was briefly looking in the wrong direction at 2 periods of time, and that I left the church immediately after communion. So those were the reasons that you had me thrown out of the church, and you thought it was going to make me capitulate. This is because you're insane. And you're very used to getting your own way, aren't you? Well, bad luck, boyo. Anyway, The other thing is, in relation to this, I think that you're using mind control techniques, because I know from my work experience and training that if a child's been abused, for example, the level of suffering and distress that that person experiences in their life, either at the time or later on, isn't actually related to the extent of the abuse or even to the identity of the person who's abusing them. The amount of distress they experience is related to how the person reacts when they first disclose the abuse. So if the person reacts in a helpful way and says that they believe them and supports them and takes care of them and keeps them safe, and perhaps deals with the abuser if they're able to do that, then the person doesn't experience a huge amount of distress that makes them less functional later in their life. So I think that you did this on purpose, you see, because I disclosed the abuse, and instead of treating me in a helpful way that would have helped me come to terms with what had happened to me, you did the opposite of that on purpose, because you knew it would be the most traumatising thing to do. And I would also say that when you had me thrown out of that church in those circumstances, that evening of my life was the first time I ever considered killing myself. And that was your intention, to traumatise me that much, wasn't it? Because I actually lost several hours of my life that evening. I got home, I had to walk home because I couldn't wait for a bus. I couldn't stand for the stress of waiting for the bus. And then I got home, which would have been about 8 o'clock in the evening, and the next thing I know, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was shaking from really deep inside my body, shaking, and I don't know where all those hours went. I've got no idea. That's how traumatised I was by what you had those brainwashed morons do to me. And you did that on purpose, and you thought I was going to capitulate or kill myself or get off the scene somehow. And that's what you thought was going to happen, and that's why you acted in such a way. It's a form of trauma-based mind control to try and make me think differently. And it is a way that psychopaths operate, but I think there's more to it than you just being an isolated psychopath. You're part of the control grid, aren't you? Anyway, I'm going to play now a clip from an interview that you gave at the Green Belt Festival a couple of months after that, because I didn't know at the time that you were also going round telling people that it was me who was making sexual advances to this priest rather than the other way around. I didn't know that you were telling people that. And it's quite clear that this isn't mentioned in the letters that had me sacked from everything and thrown out of the church. So you've proved that you're a liar already, haven't you, just by doing that. But to cover your back, you thought you'd go around behind my back telling everybody all over the world and in other Christian denominations, you thought you'd tell them that it was me making sexual advances to this disgusting old pervert who was more than 30 years older than me, an alcoholic and completely dysfunctional. Anyway, you were doing that, and your intention was that I capitulate and go back and smooth everything over and say, oh, I'll never say anything so horrible about you again, just don't be nasty to me, I'll do anything. That was your intention. So I'm going to play this clip from an interview that you gave at the Green Belt Festival at the end of August in 2004. This was after you'd had me thrown out of the church on the 23rd of May 2004. So here's the clip now.
Kester, thinking about the ideas of being judged judgmental. I was reflecting on the story of Jesus cleaning out the temple, and whether in fact it was more about Jesus clearing the way for the dirty to get into the temple. I'm just wondering if you could reflect on the idea that Jung said that the church is purified to the point of sterility, and in fact we need a healthier engagement with our dirt and allow people to come into the place where they can do their dirt work.
Yeah. One of the most striking things in the Gospels is, of course, that Jesus pays no attention, it seems, to issues about cleanliness and uncleanliness when people come to him. He tells some of them to go and sort it out afterwards. You know, the leper cleansed has to go and see the priest and sort it out. Jesus is not simply overturning the entire system. I think as a historical matter that's fairly clear. But at the point of delivery, as you might say, that's not the question he asks. So those who touch him, and he doesn't stop them. Those he engages with in conversation, it's not an issue. And I do think that very often the church has been rather like the disciples in the Gospels, forming a kind of protective cordon around Jesus, saying, well, you can't come to him. Now, usually, of course, Jesus finds ways around that in the Gospels and today. But I think there is that nervousness in the church, as if we can't quite have the confidence to let people as they are be engaged by Jesus, and then watch how it unfolds, so to speak. And that's patience again. I mentioned impatience earlier on, and I think that's one of the great Christian failings, different kinds of impatience. Jesus in the Gospels doesn't seem to me to prescribe exactly how and at what rate you have to be converted. He's there, he engages, people have access to him. And when that happens, things happen. So, in regard to the cleansing of the temple, I think it's a good analogy, because the temple sacrificial system and the money-changing business is really all about what do you need before you can come into the presence of God. And I think Jesus consistently in the Gospel says, look, it's not a question of what you need to come into the presence of God. Frankly, you need what you can never have. If you're playing that game, you'll never be in credit. Forget it. Don't think in those terms. Assume God is accessible. Assume God is here before you. And enter that space where he is. How does the church do that? It's the big challenge, which we repeatedly get wrong, but I think that is the issue. Because if we impatiently set the conditions under which people can even begin to engage, there is, as I think you were hinting, quite a lot of pressure to pretend you're more sorted out than you are in order to get in, rather than take the time it takes to do the sorting. Something like that.
The questioner, Kester, is the author of a book called The Complex Christ, which is published this weekend.
Oh, right.
And he explores the issue of dirt, and I will give you a copy in order to justify this plug. Question up there, please.
So I'm moving back on now to the things that you did behind my back in the Bristol diocese, which weren't quite so bad because they didn't affect every area of my life. I just got on with things, and no one was trying to screw me as far as I remember, not any of the clergy anyway. So I'm going to talk now about the fact that you wanted me to think that you were my only friend in the world, and that I'd go running back over the Severn Bridge to you when everything went bad in Bristol. But the reason it had gone bad was because you were puppeteering it all from behind the scenes, which I didn't know at the time. Anyway, I'm going to read this letter now that was written to a friend of mine. after he wrote to you to complain that I'd been turned down for being a deacon in the church in Wales. And I'll just say briefly, the process of being accepted for training for ordination in the church in Wales is that you have an interview with the diocesan selection board, and then you go to the provincial selection board for a 2 or 3 day selection conference, and then that conference makes a recommendation to the bishop, and it's up to the bishop whether he accepts that recommendation, whether the board recommends the person or doesn't recommend the person. The bishop has the ultimate decision. It's only a recommendation. So if the bishop strongly disagrees with the recommendation, for example, if they turn someone down, then he can just say, oh well, I don't agree with this and I'll send you for training anyway. So this is what you say in a letter to a friend of mine, which is dated the 6th of December 1993, and it's on your headed notepaper. I might put it in front of the camera in a minute, and it's got your squiggling thumbprint at the end of it. So here's what you say. As you know, I agree about Rebecca, and in my judgment the selection board made a mistake. But I have to say also that it won't do surely to conclude that the system of selection is completely useless. Otherwise I'd be casting doubt on other verdicts which I think have been right, and, on at least one recent occasion, more courageous than I'd expected. Personnel varies, as you know, from one conference to another, and I can only believe that this was a particularly unsympathetic panel. It rejected both candidates from our diocese, so I have a certain prejudice on this. But I have never known a selection system that was proof against error. I'm sure ours could be better, and I don't and can't know exactly what was wrong with this particular panel, but it's a bit extravagant to claim that it can command no confidence at all. I repeat, as I've said emphatically to Rebecca, that I do think it a perverse decision, but I have no reason to think that the procedures were in any way improperly handled or not observed. It's simply that certain people came to a faulty decision, as they sometimes do, and we are now left with the unpleasant job of coming to terms with that and finding a way forward that may heal some of the wounds of which I am well aware. So there's another 2 paragraphs to that which I might come on to in a minute, but I just want to say that this is disingenuous because you were at the time approaching clergy in the church in Wales, not even in your diocese, in another diocese, and also friends of mine and other associates, and inciting them to treat me in quite a cruel way, let's put it that way. So you were intent on causing as much damage to me as possible. You think I was born yesterday and I don't know what was behind all of this. You are a very cruel and sadistic man, and you wanted to bring me under your control. And I'm just going to read the last paragraph of this letter now. I very much want Rebecca's vocation to be nurtured, and I'm glad she has friends who care about it, as you evidently do. And this letter doesn't mean I'm anything but angry about what happened. However, I can't see it as quite such a straightforward miscarriage of justice, let alone symptomatic of a trend or policy in the selection procedure. I only hope she will now find a way forward, and the diocese will be doing all it can to support in this. With all good wishes, yours sincerely, Rowan Monmouth. Monmouth is the Diocese of Monmouth. It's customary for Anglican bishops in Britain to use the name of the diocese as a kind of surname. So you were saying that you were supporting me and saying that there was something wrong with the people who weren't supporting me. So that's what you were saying to my face and to my friend who'd written to you. Yet behind my back you were stirring up all this strife everywhere and slandering me and causing people to treat me in a cruel way because you wanted me to go running back to you and to agree to anything. So this letter was written on the 6th of December 1993, and in July 1994 I came to see you at your office, which is attached to your house in Newport. And instead of taking me into your office, first of all you scheduled the appointment outside of office hours so your secretary wasn't there. Then instead of taking me into the office where my file was, you took me into your house. When I wanted to talk about being a deacon, you were quite annoyed about this because you had to go off and get my file. What did you think I'd come to see you about? And then after you'd pushed your wife out of the door, after she'd barged into the living room which we were sitting in, which I don't blame her because it's her house, you pushed her out of the door, you came back in and told me she'd gone to a meeting, a feminist reading group or something like that, you said, and then you tried to get your leg over. You were making eyes at me, Rowan. I'm not daft. And then that made me so uncomfortable I decided to leave. And then as I was walking down the corridor to go out of your house, there's some small rooms, at least one small room to the left on this little corridor leading out of your house. And I walked down this corridor and then you said behind me, "Do you want pud?" And I was really startled by that, and I jumped round, and I then noticed that your 4-year-old daughter was sitting in a little side room eating beans on toast, and you were speaking to her, but you wanted me to think you were speaking to me. And she said she wanted a lolly. You really freaked me out. You tried to get your leg over. Now you listen to me. I used to be a barmaid, and there were blokes always trying it on. Married men, older married men, they'd even try it on when my boyfriend was working in the same bar at the same time. You think I don't know when older men are trying it on? You'll say anything to defend yourself. You were telling them I was mentally ill in Bristol, weren't you? Because you didn't want anybody to believe me when I was telling them how useless you were and what a waste of space you are. You've gone round slandering me, partly as a means of controlling me, so I'd think you were my only friend in the world, and also to discredit me if I blew the whistle on you, saying I was mentally ill and a delinquent sex maniac and fantasist, when you're a disgusting pervert who's working for the globalist control matrix and making Illuminati signs in your videos where you're lying about what the gospel says and what Jesus says just to undermine and destroy Christianity. I know what's behind it all, Rowan, so don't even bother. Just don't bother. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the letter and the clip, but you can be reassured I won't be running back to any perverted old farts who think I was born yesterday. I could handle dirty old men a long time before I even clapped eyes on you, and don't think I don't know when they're trying it on. I already told you the story about what happened when an old man tried to get me back to his house when I was 17. And I was working in a bar when I was 19. And I had to deal with these men. They weren't bad men, you know, in the sense that you're a bad man. When I brushed them off, they just left it, or they'd treat it as a joke. They didn't go around trying to destroy me for decades. they'd probably have been surprised if I'd said yes. So I'll leave it there for now, because I've been ranting on for quite some time. But I've got plenty more to say, because I can hardly keep up with all the rubbish you keep coming out with. I've still got your Christmas talk to deal with yet, that you did at St Paul's Cathedral. I'm so sorry that I didn't get to arrest you last week. But don't worry, there's always this week, isn't there? And you've still got it to look forward to, you see. I don't want you to be disappointed that it's all over. I just want you to be looking forward to it all the time. So be alert. Hasta la próxima.